Welcome to the podcast, folks. Today we're diving into the ins and outs of Ethereum 2.0, the grand evolution of Ethereum as it moves from proof of work to proof of stake.
I'm excited about this topic. So, at its core, Ethereum 2.0 is about solving scalability and efficiency issues, right?
Exactly. You see, Ethereum started out as a global supercomputer envisioned by Vitalik Buterin, but its original proof of work design limited its transaction speed and had some serious fee issues.
Right. And with those high gas fees and slower transaction rates, it wasn't exactly ideal for everyday use or for complex applications like NFTs and DeFi.
Yeah, and that's where Ethereum 2.0 comes into play. It's a multi-phased upgrade, and it's like rebuilding your house with a modern design instead of patching up old leaks, you know?
Absolutely. So, let's break it down. We've got three main phases. Phase 0 with the beacon chain, Phase 1, which is the merge of the beacon chain with the mainnet and sharding, and then Phase 2, where EWASM comes into the picture to replace the EVM.
Precisely. Beginning with Phase 0, the beacon chain was launched back in December 2020. It doesn't affect the main Ethereum chain right away, but establishes the new proof of stake system by letting users stake their ETH and become validators.
And as I understand it, staking requires locking up 32 ETH, which is quite a hefty bar for many users, right?
Exactly. Yep. It's like asking someone to invest a significant amount upfront for a promise of better returns later, an invitation to really commit to the network's long-term vision.
That makes sense. Then moving to Phase 1, it sounds like this is where the merge happens, connecting the beacon chain to the mainnet so that the whole system works together seamlessly using proof of stake.
Yep. Phase 1 not only brings about the merge, but also introduces eventually sharding. Sharding divides the blockchain into several smaller chains, 64 shards to be in exact terms, so that each shard can manage its own set of transactions.
I like that analogy. It's like turning a congested superhighway into multiple lanes so traffic flows smoother.
Absolutely. Sharding is critical for scalability because it, well, essentially spreads out the load. Instead of having a single congested network handling everything, each shard has a manageable slice of tasks.
Now then, Phase 2 is where Ethereum WebAssembly, EWASM, steps into the picture. How does that change the game compared to the Ethereum virtual machine, EVM, we know?
Great question. So, EWASM is aimed at replacing the EVM, making transactions and smart contract execution a lot faster and more efficient. It compiles code way quicker than the EVM, and it's compatible with common languages like C and C++, which means more developers can participate.
That sounds like a huge win for developers. But let me ask, don't you think that switching out a legacy system, the EVM, is a massive undertaking that might introduce its own challenges?
You bring up a valid point. Transitioning to EWASM isn't a walk in the park. Developers have had to overcome significant technical hurdles, and there have been delays as a result. It's a high-stakes change that promises exponential improvements but requires meticulous work and testing.
And that's important because while the promise of increased speed and lower fees is enticing, any misstep in such foundational changes could really set things back, couldn't it?
Exactly, but the upside is enormous. With better scalability, Ethereum could jump from processing 15 transactions per second to potentially accommodating up to 100,000 transactions per second. That's like moving from a trickle to a full-blown cascade, reducing congestion and cost issues dramatically.
Wow, that's a game changer for sure. And from what I gather, moving to proof of stake isn't just about iterating on speed, it's also about environmental efficiency.
Right on. Proof of stake eliminates the power-hungry computational race that miners used in proof-of-work systems, which has huge implications for environmental sustainability. Instead of burning energy solving puzzles, validators secure the network simply by staking their ETH.
Yep. So in effect, Ethereum is not only becoming more scalable, but also way more eco-friendly. And that could have ripple effects across the crypto space, right?
Absolutely, it could force other blockchain networks to innovate and adopt more sustainable models, pushing the industry forward. It's a bit like a domino effect. Ethereum 2.0's success could very well set new standards.
I love that perspective, but there's still a bit of skepticism among some smaller factions that argue Ethereum, even after transitioning, might still struggle with decentralization. What's your take on that?
Well, that's a thoughtful critique. The concern is that with staking, you might end up concentrating power in the hands of those who can afford large amounts of ETH. However, the design of proof of stake is intended to be more decentralized over time by lowering the hardware entry barriers compared to mining.
Mm, right. So while there might be some centralization risks, the efforts to build a truly open network could mitigate that over time. It's a balancing act, isn't it?
Indeed, it is. And let's not forget that Ethereum 2.0 will coexist with a version that still uses proof of work, known as ETH-POW, which means there's a sort of fallback to the previous model for those who prefer
Interesting.
it.
That definitely shows the transition is being handled with care for different users' needs.
For sure. And speaking of handling transitions, the roadmap clearly outlines these phases to help users and developers adapt gradually. It's not an overnight switch. It's a multi-year evolution of the network.
It's fascinating to think about how foundational changes like these can reshape an entire ecosystem. With Ethereum 2.0's improvements in transaction speed, environmental impact, and developer accessibility, it seems primed to tackle many of the challenges that Bitcoin's model simply can't overcome.
Exactly. Bitcoin's solid, but its proof of work model has inherent limitations, especially in scalability. Ethereum's shift to proof of stake is like upgrading computer hardware from a fossil of an old machine to something that's cutting edge, faster, and more efficient.
Right. And as more transactions move on to this improved network, we can expect fees to drop, making it more practical for smaller, everyday transactions, plus opening the door for more intricate applications.
Absolutely. And think about decentralized finance or DeFi and NFTs. With reduced congestion, minting NFTs or trading tokens becomes far less costly, which could bring more users into the ecosystem.
That certainly can change the narrative for Ethereum's usability, but I'm also curious about the long-term value implications. Some experts predict high price surges for Ether, yet others argue it might stabilize instead, focusing on utility rather than speculation.
Great observation. Ether is less about being a stored asset like gold and more about facilitating transactions across the network. So while a boost in price is possible, the main goal is to ensure Ether's practical utility escalates. Essentially, it might become the fuel that powers a vast range of applications rather than just an investment asset.
Yeah, I like that. It shifts the conversation from purely speculative investment to a real-world utility model, which in turn might attract institutional players, right?
Exactly. And to add to that, as more institutional investors come on board and more developers build on the improved system, we could see it's like a virtuous cycle where network adoption drives more capability and more capability drives adoption.
Mm. And that could be a compelling argument for banks and corporations to rethink their stance on crypto entirely.
Absolutely. With the reduced energy footprint and enhanced security, Ethereum 2.0 could very well lure a whole new class of users, those who were previously put off by the environmental and scalability issues of proof of work systems.
Right. It really paints a picture of a more inclusive, efficient future for blockchain technology in general. But do you think there are any major pitfalls that the community should keep an eye on as Ethereum 2.0 rolls out further?
Well, as with any massive technological overhaul, there are risks. Delays in implementing phases, unforeseen bugs, or even issues with centralization in staking could pose hurdles. That said, the Ethereum team's ongoing efforts and community vigilance are pivotal in managing these risks.
It seems like a carefully calibrated experiment, risky for sure, but with the potential to redefine how we use blockchains.
Exactly. Ethereum 2.0 is not just a minor update. It's a fundamental reimagining of the network's infrastructure. And while there will be challenges, the benefits of moving to a sustainable, scalable, and more accessible system are too compelling to ignore.
Yep. This discussion really highlights how transformative these upgrades could be. I'm eagerly waiting to see how the roadmap unfolds and, more importantly, how the ecosystem adapts.
Me too. It's a thrilling time for blockchain enthusiasts everywhere, watching a network evolve to meet the challenges of tomorrow. Thanks for being part of this deep dive.
Absolutely. Thanks for the insightful chat.